Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Haas-in-Place. We're a Berkeley Haas alum, Jessica, and a Berkeley Haas current student, myself, Don, perform for you songs from the concert that would have been, the concert we had planned for mid-April until coronavirus happened, and we're all sheltering in place. So today's song, I'm very excited about, Franz Schubert's An die Musik, or To Music. This is an ode to music, a song that I think is particularly relevant for the situation many of us find ourselves in right now. Before we hear the song, though, I'd like to provide a little introduction. I found that these introductions can be helpful to people, providing a little extra context about the song, about the poem, about what I think about it, all sorts of things. None of it is necessarily important to you to enjoy the song. If it doesn't work for you, that's great. There's no right way to listen to music, classical music included, so feel free to skip ahead if you just want to listen to the song. It's really wonderful. I think you're going to enjoy it. But all those caveats about art and music aside, the introduction today, the plan is, first I'm going to talk about the poem, the song, a little background, sort of history, political, economic, social context. Part 1, the section I've decided to call this The Song, What's Actually Going On Here. Part 2 of today, my personal experiences with the song. My relationship with it, how I felt about it, some vintage Don thoughts. Yeah, all to sort of personalize the song. That's really what we're after here. What to call this, millennial musings, pedestrian patter, Don thoughts. How about just the song, but how do I feel about it? Go with that for now. Section 3 of today, things to listen for, or what makes it great. All right, so part 1, what did we call it? Part 1. The song, what's actually going on here? So, of course, this is art song, which we've previously defined as poetry set to music. So we'll start with the poem. The poem was written by Franz von Schubert, not to be confused with Schubert, but a contemporary and friend of Schubert's, so Schubert. I'll just read it to you, the English translation. To music. You lovely art, in how many gloomy hours, when life's fierce orbit entangled me, have you kindled my heart to warmer love? Have you carried me away to a better world? Often has a sigh flown from your harp, a sweet holy chord from you, unlocked for me the heaven of better times. You lovely art, I thank you for this. You lovely art, I thank you. So that's it. 2 stanzas. Okay, so that's the poem. Let's shift to Schubert for a second. So he's found this poem, he likes it. It's a song about music. I can write a song about music. Let's put ourselves in Schubert's shoes. How do we think about that? What will the song sound like? Will it be sort of like fast and upbeat? Will it be slow and dark and gloomy? These are the very basic questions that maybe Schubert was thinking of, but really it comes to the heart of what is the poet saying and how are they saying it? What sort of tone do we find in the poem, and how might we, Schubert, the composer, create that? Hold on to that thought. I want to talk about what was going on in the world, because that might inform what inspired this poem and what inspired the thought of the song, what inspired the song. What's going on in this world? So the song was written in, 1817, so the poem around then, maybe shortly before. Song for voice and piano. What was the world like in Vienna in sort of the late 18th, early 19th century, the time preceding the song? One big part was the Napoleonic Wars, a couple decades maybe, long time, lots of wars, very problematic. Vienna itself was occupied by the French army twice, in 1805 and 1809. So that happened. Also, wars are expensive, so the Austrian government had piled up a lot of debt fighting these wars. Naturally, They use the classic technique of printing money to pay off these debts. Inevitably, that leads to inflation, and the people start to wonder whether the money's worth anything. So uncertainty prevails, economic situation not great. Meanwhile, the wars are continuing until finally, in 1815, the wars are over. Napoleon is defeated at last. Again, alas. The Congress of Vienna takes place. So this is 1815 time frame, right before the song was written. And these European powers all come together in Vienna to figure out what to do about the world, or at least Europe, given that Napoleon has just like conquered a bunch of stuff and territories have been all mixed up around. They basically decide to redraw the map in a way that at least hopefully creates a balance of power so that one country is not too strong, and thereby hopefully disincentivizing further expeditionary wars and such. Makes sense. As people have reflected back on how these ambassadors did this, some have sort of pointed to the way in which really what they did was sort of support monarchy and quash a lot of the revolutions and rebellions and, yearning for human freedom. At the same time, they provided arguably stability that led to economic growth, prosperity, improved living standards. The Industrial Revolution happened not too long after. So relative peace in Europe for a while. So good, bad, you decide. So all of that chaos has been going on for a couple decades now. Basically all of Schubert and Schobert's life. That's sort of the background. So you can sort of imagine what maybe Schubert was thinking of when he talks about these grauen Stunden, these gloomy hours, what he's referring to when he thinks about the ways that music comforted him, this sort of holy chord, this sigh of a harp, the way that it just met him in his place of need. And you can see how someone like Schubert might be attracted to sort of set this song, or this poem about music, to music, and capture that in a way. So that's part one. That's what's going on here. All right, part two. Part two. Ah, yes, my relationship with the song. So for a long time, I didn't get it. I wasn't. Musik is one of Schubert's most famous songs. But it's just so pleasant and shallow, maybe? It's like, imagine asking Picasso, one of the most inventive, creative, innovative painters of the 20th century, to paint an ode to painting, and he gives you like a sunset, and it's like kind of nice, but it's like not what you're expecting. It's kind of how I feel about Musik and Schubert. Like, I love Schubert's music. He wrote Gretchen, he wrote Erlkönig, Winterreise, all this like fascinating, dramatic, dark, amazing music. And then this is his ode to music. Like, it's a little vapid, maybe? I don't know. That's kind of how I thought about it. Ultimately, though, I found that with much of Schubert's music, it takes time. There's some subtlety there. There's not quite the immediacy to it in a lot of his music, the same way that there is with Beethoven, another contemporary of Schubert. It just sort of grabs you with Beethoven. With Schubert, oftentimes, you have to sort of work with it. You have to find it. You have to let it percolate. I sort of experienced that with this song as well. It took me a while to get there. If it doesn't take you a while to get there, then great, good for you. I couldn't figure it out, but I got it now. People sometimes ask me, Don, what should I drink while I listen to you play? First thought is, wow, is it that bad? But I'm working on my negative self-talk, so quickly move on to the second thought, which is, great question, love where your head's at. Whatever you like. Tea, coffee. I prefer pour-overs because I identify as hipster bougie sometimes. But if you're looking for something alcoholic, should I go on here?
Yes, Don, please go on.
Great. Okay, so for example, a couple criteria I might offer you. One, think about the mood of the song and how what you're drinking might complement or maybe provide some counterpoint to it. Second criteria is geography, where the song's from. Okay. So for this first criteria, it's interesting. So we talked about how this song is both simple and yet has some complexity to it. It's pleasant sounding, it's sort of lighter, a little brighter. You might think about a Sancerre, some sort of like dry white wine, but has some like minerally interestingness to it. I certainly wouldn't pair it with a big jammy California Cabernet or some huge oaked Chardonnay that's just dripping with butter. You won't even hear the song. It's like you wouldn't go to a wood-paneled cozy pub in the English countryside and order a margarita, or a vineyard in the south of France and ask for a White Claw.
Or would you?
It should match in some way, right? I think. If you're looking for a cocktail, I might suggest a whiskey daisy. So a bourbon base provides some of that warmth and structure. Fresh squeezed lemon juice and Grand Marnier provide some brightness, some citrus notes, a little bit of simple, of course. But then I would make sure to top it with some Angostura bitters and some fresh ground nutmeg to provide a little extra complexity and warmth to the drink. So you have all of these things kind of working together, kind of like with the song. Yeah. Part 2, geography. So the song written in Vienna, I think, somewhere around there. So maybe an Austrian wine, maybe a Gruner Veltliner. Interesting idea. If you like beer, Stiegl is brewed in Salzburg, one of my favorite Austrian beers. So those are some things, some thoughts, some Don thoughts. Okay, part 3, what to listen for, what makes it great. 3 things I would like to share with you. The first is, hearkening back to what we talked about earlier, the mood that Schubert sets, the way he captures the tone of the poem. He just writes this very simple melodic line, this very simple accompaniment in a major key. It's not moving too fast. It sort of allows time to sort of exist in the space of gratitude. I love how he does that here. The second thing is the interplay between the piano and the voice. We talked about this in German Art Song before, but specifically the way that the left hand of the piano part, so sort of this bass melody, starts off, provides at least a fragment of the primary theme, which the singer then takes up, but that left hand sort of keeps going and provides a sort of counter melody, or maybe this duet with the voice. It's something that is interesting because I think it adds just a little extra layer of texture, a little extra complexity to make the song just hold together better and make it just a little more interesting, actually. It's sort of like, what would the song be like if you didn't have that? It was just sort of the same melody and the same chords, but no bass melody. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't quite work. It's those kinds of things that I think are interesting. The third thing is what I've decided right now to call the warm chord. Because it's just a warm sounding chord. It's been used in a bunch of times in ways and places, but I think Schubert uses it very effectively. Particularly for me in the second theme of one of his A minor piano sonatas. He gets to this chord built on the fifth of another chord, so it's like this mashup of chords, and it simultaneously creates this yearning and warmth, this sort of yearning and rest at the same time. So it's the chord really at the end, sort of the apex of this phrase that I'm about to play. It's about the end of this little selection here. Creates this wonderfully warm sound. Schubert uses it in Musik in the interlude and postlude section of the piano part, sort of between the first and the second verse, and then at the very end. And it's passing, it's this fleeting moment, but it creates this tension that sort of moves the line forward and also just instills a sense of like yearning and this sort of deep, just this deep warmth that I think the poet feels about music. just loves the way he used that simple harmonic device, but so effective at capturing the mood. So those are a few things to listen for as you listen to Musik. With that introduction, I would now like to present to you Jessica Wan, soprano, and myself performing Schubert's Musik.